Hey there, it's John from Living the Music, talking about Paul's 1986 album, Press to Play. We're going to look at why did this album turn out the way that it did? What do we like about it? What do we maybe not love about it? What led up to it? What came after? Who are the main players in this album? And ultimately, how do we rate it? Please play along in the comments below if you've heard this album. If you never have, maybe give it a listen. It's interesting. And we'd love it if you'd like this video, and I'd love it if you would subscribe to my channel. Now, diving in. August of 1986, this comes out. It had an advanced single press. That got a lot of MTV airplay at the time. It ultimately was not what Paul hoped for commercially. It didn't go gold. The single didn't make the top 20. None of the subsequent singles did very well. So he was ultimately disappointed. Going into the album, I'm sure he had quite high hopes. Now, it was coming off a previous disappointment, which was his Broad Street project. The soundtrack turned out okay. He's got half Beatle tunes, half solo tunes redone. This was a gold album. He has No More Lonely Nights on here, which was a big single in America and the UK. But the movie was a big flop, commercially and critically. So he was definitely hoping to rebound for his next studio project. So he decides to assemble a new team that he hasn't worked with and see if he can create a group of all-stars that come together and create some magic. So he'd been working with George Martin on the previous 3 albums. During that time, one of his associates that was doing background vocals and guitar was Eric Stewart from 10cc. He decides he's going to co-write with him, see what they can come up with, and some of those songs would end up on this album. Eric, of course, well known for songs like Things We Do for Love and I'm Not in Love. Fantastic songs in terms of their structure, their lyrics, and their sound. So he's a great talent to bring on board, especially at that time. And then on the production side, he brings over Hugh Padgham. Now, Hugh was about 30 at the time, kind of a hotshot young guy. He had worked with The Police, Peter Gabriel, Phil Collins. He would go on to work with Genesis soon after this album. He produced a lot of hits, man. So I'm sure Paul was excited to get some of that flavor of, that 80s edgy sound for his next project. I'm sure he was happy with George Martin's work on Tug of War, Pipes of Peace, Broad Street. But, after 3 times working together, he wanted to kind of expand and see what else he could come up with and get with the times, so to speak. So Hugh was the guy for that, especially on the engineering side. He was famous for this kind of gated reverb drum sound that's most well known on the song In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins. But it's all over, almost all of 80s singles. It just became de rigueur for any pop album of that time. And as I say, Paul wanted to get on board with that. When he talked to Hugh about co-producing this album, he asked who he would bring over in terms of musicians, and Hugh recommended Jerry Marotta on drums from Peter Gabriel's band, Eddie Rayner on keyboards from Split Enz, Carlos Alomar on guitar, mainly from David Bowie. So that's a great group. And then you got, of course, Paul. He can play anything. You got Eric, who's fantastic on guitar, but also can play keyboards. So, and bring in Linda for some nice background vocals too. So it does sound like a really nice team. Unfortunately, part of what went south on this project was some kind of misunderstanding on the roles that Eric and Hugh were playing in terms of production. So each of them thought they were co-producing the album with Paul. From Eric's point of view, he thought that Hugh was engineering, but that Eric and Paul, they were the producers together. Hugh thought he was co-producing with Paul, and Eric was just there as a musician and, kind of lending a hand because he was a co-songwriter. How this misunderstanding happened is murky. Paul takes responsibility for it in his 1989 tour book, where he says, I must have led Eric to believe that he was producing the album, and that he took responsibility for that, and exactly the ins and outs of what led to the misunderstanding we're never going to know unless we got all these people together and put them under a lie detector test or something like that. But I tend to want to think well of people, and I think they're all telling the truth, and they just have a different take on it. Eric thinks he was promised the production role. Hugh says no, he was going to be the producer from day one. He never knew anything about Eric being one of the producers. If my best guess would be that Paul might have thought, let's just get together, and I know Hugh can do the engineering, he can make it sound great, and let's see if the three of us can work together, and we'll all sort of co-produce it and see what happens. So he maybe wasn't as absolutely definitive, especially with Eric, as he could have been. And then, he doesn't like conflict, so he just kind of let this simmer for a while. Apparently, it all came to a head one day in the studio where Eric was in the control room with Hugh, and he heard something from Paul down below, and he said to Hugh, let's do that again, some part of the song, or do it differently. And Hugh got on the talk back to Paul, and he said something like, he wants you to try that again, referring to Eric. Eric took some offense to that because, first of all, why not use his name? He's sitting right there. And he felt sort of, I guess, like thrown under the bus by Hugh. So he pulled Paul aside later that day and said, what's going on, man? I thought I had a voice on this album. Why am I getting attitude from Hugh? Apparently, also, Hugh told Paul, listen, if there's any conflict here and you're not sure that I'm the sole producer with you, I'm out of here. So later that night, Eric got a call from Paul's manager saying you're no longer needed on the production side. So that was that. Eric says he kind of fell off the project then. But according to this book by Luca Perassi, which came out in 2025, he says that Eric did stay around. And maybe in that case, it's just a matter of maybe his heart wasn't in it as much anymore. But anyway, they went on and they did the album the way Paul and Hugh wanted to do it. And that's part of the reason that it turned out the way that it turned out. Eric says he would have preferred a more organic sound. He was probably going for more of a Wings type sound, 10cc type sound, but maybe a little bit edgier on the guitar tones. Hugh was under the impression that Paul wanted this modern 80s sounding album, so he brought in all the reverb and sequencers and all of that, and Paul threw himself into that. So there was a disagreement on that front, and Paul got his way because it's his album. Would it be interesting to hear Eric's version of the album? Yeah, definitely. But I still find what Paul and Hugh came up with to still sound very good. It's just that, yeah, it has that unmistakable 80s feel, as the quote title of this book says. It's certainly placed right there in the mid 80s, and it's up to your taste if you can enjoy that or not. I do enjoy it. I think it was somewhat brave of Paul to try something different, and he wanted to keep up with the times, and maybe he wasn't setting the edge anymore, but at least he wanted to be cutting edge along with everybody else. And like I say, I enjoy what they came up with. I think Eric's more organic sounding would also be cool. Maybe better, maybe, but we'll never know, more than likely. So let's go through these tracks here. Now, on the vinyl, you get 10 tracks. On the CD, you get 13. So, of course, I always prefer the CD because I like the 3 extra tracks. But if we take the vinyl version as the definitive version, you got 10 tracks on here. And part of the issue with this album is the songwriting. And I think especially on the lyric front, in my opinion, the lyrics are not that great. Paul could sometimes get lazy on lyrics, in my opinion, and I'm not alone in that opinion. And even with Eric here, I think they didn't necessarily do their best on most of these. There's a couple of exceptions, but to me, the lyrics let down a lot of this album. And then melodically, it's also not Paul's strongest either, with a couple of exceptions. So going through it here, you start off the side A with Stranglehold. That's an interesting rocker, or, fairly straightforward. It's got, different sections to it that are cool. It's got a kind of annoying sax that comes in and out. Eric was particularly upset with that. He's like, where the hell did that come from? He didn't envision that on the track at all. So, again, it's up to you whether you love it or not. I find the track fun, but it's not a remarkable Paul track. Good Times Coming, Feel the Sun. I do enjoy this one a lot. When I first got the album, this was my favorite, and I still have a lot of sentimental love for it today. It really makes me feel good. As you can tell by the words there, good times coming / feel the sun. It's a positive song, if you will. It's about, sort of like finding enjoyment in life, or hoping for enjoyment to come. It's one of his 2 songs spliced together kind of thing, but I like both sections of the song. I think it's great. I wish it went on longer. Talk More Talk, that's an experimental track. Paul is kind of made that one up in the studio, I think. He's using purposefully nonsense lyrics to sort of make some point about language and communication, but it doesn't do a lot for me. It's ultimately a little bit weak melodically. Footprints is an acoustic ballad of he and Eric's. This one gets a lot of praise from fans, it seems. I do like this one a lot. I don't think it's up there with his best acoustic numbers, like, Mother Nature's Son or Blackbird, or even something like Jenny Wren from later on. I think it's nice, but melodically, it's not top shelf to me. The words, though, are good. Here's where he and Eric, they did write very thoughtful, good lyrics. Only Love Remains is a piano ballad. That one is also a favorite of mine. I enjoy that quite a bit. It's very sensitive love song that he wrote for Linda about their relationship, and I just really appreciate that. I mean, you see it right there. Their love for each other is a love for the ages, and I think he really represented that well here. And it does have nice words and a really nice melody. I put that right up there with his best piano ballads. Press, this was the lead single. It's kind of a dance track. It's okay. The lyrics really let it down. The groove is fun. Nothing special. Pretty Little Head, that's an experimental track that has a nice groove to it. I do enjoy that one. Eric and Paul put that together. Paul's on drums on that one. Nice job. Move Over Busker, that's kind of a straight ahead rocker. They're trying to, be as heavy as they can be, but the lyrics let it down to me. Angry, that's Paul on bass, Pete Townsend on guitar, Phil Collins on drums, but it's not that special of a song. I wish Paul would have let them in on the songwriting of it. I think they could have enhanced it. As it is, it's just okay. However Absurd closes the vinyl. I do like that one a lot. Some people say the melody is kind of non-existent on the verses, but I don't mind it. And when he gets to the chorus, he's really lets it go vocally. He's really, pushing the limits, and by the end of it, he's screeching. I love it. People say that's a very Beatley type track, like from Magical Mystery Tour type thing. So I think that's an interesting closer. Now, the 3 tracks on the CD, you got It's Not True, which is a Paul track, and that's a defense of Linda. It's a sweet song. It's got booming drums on it. It's pretty cool, but it's probably my least favorite of the 3. You got Right Away, which is a really interesting track, kind of playing on those words right away. You could hear it a couple different ways. And then you got Tough on a Tightrope, probably my favorite of the 3. Really nice track. I believe that's he and Eric, and good lyrically. Right Away's, I think, also good lyrically. So they were able to do good lyrics. It's not consistent enough on the whole album. If I was to redo the vinyl, I would probably take out Move Over Busker and Talk More Talk, and I would put in Right Away and Tough on a Tightrope. I think that would have made this a tighter album, and probably even would have done better commercially. There's another tune that's interesting called Hang Glide. That was an instrumental that they did, that he and Eric wrote together, and that's quite an interesting instrumental. That might have been a good addition here too. What might have given this album another interesting flavor. If we had to take out another tune, maybe I'd take out Angry and put in Hang Glide. That would have made an interesting album. That'd make a good playlist one of these days. Well, they labored over this album for months and months and months. I think, about a year from start to finish. And even when it was complete, when he was releasing the singles, he was doing all kinds of remixes. He would give it to other, engineers to remix them. And so there was some uncertainty in Paul's experience of this album. Keep trying to get it right over the months and months and months. And I think maybe he was never terribly satisfied with it. When he did interviews for the album, when it came out, he wasn't sort of overly effusive in talking about it. He was a little bit understated in selling it, which was unusual for him. And maybe he could kind of see the writing on the wall, but it didn't do that well commercially. It didn't go gold in the States. The singles didn't do very well, and it kind of came and went pretty quickly. I think he was playing around with the idea of going on tour off of this album, but especially with the reception it got, he lost interest in that, and he quickly went back to the drawing board again. Paul's not going to stay down for long. He's going to pick himself up and keep trying to get it right. So he moves on from there, and straight away, we didn't mention Spies Like Us, by the way, which came between Broad Street and Press to Play. That was for the movie Spies Like Us. That came out in 1985. They recorded that during the Press to Play sessions, but it was released, a year earlier. That was another top 10 hit for Paul, the last top 10 hit for him in America. So he must have been optimistic, but the album subsequently didn't perform the way he wanted. So he's got to rebound again. First thing he does is he puts out this single, Once Upon a Long Ago, which is a fantastic Paul McCartney song. Love this song. That's, I think, produced by Phil Ramone. And that was released subsequent or, in alignment with All the Best. Unfortunately, they didn't put it on the American version of All the Best, but it is on the British version, which I have here. And I always love that album cover. I think that's a great shot of Paul, and I love these little icons of the different songs. So All the Best comes out a year or two later, and that's kind of like, treading water until the next album can come out, which eventually would be Flowers in the Dirt in 1989. So for this one, he drops Eric Stewart. He's got a new songwriting partner, Elvis Costello. He works with a number of different producers on this, and it works a bit better. This one does go gold, but still, My Brave Face doesn't do terribly well as a single. It's sort of, maybe 21 on the charts. But he goes on a big world tour. He does play a lot of this album, which I give him credit for, but he ends up going back into the well of Beatles songs quite a bit more than he ever had live. And this starts a new trend for Paul of being, let's say, more nostalgic and trying to recapture that Beatles magic on subsequent albums. So I think if we look back to the legacy of Press to Play, you could say that in some ways, under his own name, this is the last experimental-ish album that he put out. He had done McCartney 2 several years before this, which was also experimental, and then this one, and then you could say with the Fireman albums later, but that wasn't under his own name. So under his own name, after Press to Play, he was much more conservative. Now, eventually, by the time of Chaos and Creation in the Backyard in 2005, he's working with Niles Godrich, and he's really trying to do something of excellent stature and quality. But still, it's not as all over the place sonically as this one. So I would say this stands alone as his unmistakable 80s sounding album. In some ways, one of his bravest albums, because he was trying to be different. He was trying to push himself. Whether it stacks up in the top 10 of McCartney releases or not, it's still a brave move, and McCartney fans are still going to find a way to enjoy it. And I think anybody who likes pop music and is open to sounds that are not necessarily predictable, I think we'll have time for this album as well. So those are some of my thoughts on this album. It's near and dear to my heart. I got into it, when I was in college, and I've loved it ever since. By the way, 2 great resources here: Super Deluxe Edition, Press to Play. Check these out if you can. This, I know the Luca book is available. This might be harder to find, but get it if you can. It's well worth it. For all my subscribers, thank you so much for following along with Living the Music. For anybody new to the channel, thanks for being here. And everybody, enjoy some Paul today. Enjoy your day, whatever you're up to. And we'll see you next time.